To Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alistair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company with the stories that really matter across the country. But first, with the news as we inch up towards midday, here's Simon Pusey.
Good afternoon, it's 12 o'clock. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Downing Street says an MP who claims she was sacked because of her Muslimness was invited to make a formal complaint but failed to do so. Nusrat Ghani lost her job as Transport Minister in 2020. The Prime Minister then spoke to her after learning of the extremely serious allegation. The Chief Whip, Mark Spencer, has also spoken out to deny the claims, saying he considers her remarks defamatory. Here's what the Deputy Prime Minister had to say.
I believe actions, a claim like this, as serious as this, should, but it can only happen if the person making the complaint makes it formally. That's when the procedures kick in. And just to be clear about this, that advice was given to Naz back in 2020.
The former Education Secretary has been accused of threatening to withdraw funds for a school after an MP considered voting against the government. Christian Wakeford, who recently defected to Labour, says he was warned to consider what he was doing before voting against a motion over free school meals. He told the Sunday Times Gavin Williamson, a former Chief Whip, had made the comment. Mr Williamson says he doesn't remember the conversation. The former Housing Secretary is calling for the national insurance hike, which he approved, to be postponed. Robert Jenrick says the government is responding to the cost of living crisis lamentably slowly. He added that confronting harsh realities is part of alleviating the situation for low and middle income families. A suspect accused of killing a British man with a sickle is being questioned by police in Thailand. The 49-year-old was found dead in his home with knife wounds. Another man, who's 55, was injured while trying to stop the suspect. Police say an initial investigation found they were attacked for playing music too loudly in the early hours of Saturday morning. Britain has accused the Russian president of plotting to install a pro-Moscow leader as head of the government in Ukraine. In an unusual move, the Foreign Office named former Ukrainian MP Yevhen Muriev as a potential pro-Kremlin candidate to take over in Kiev. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says it shines a light on the extent of Russian activity designed to subvert Ukraine. The former head of the army, Lord Richard Dannatt, told GB News the West needs to work out what Putin's objective is.
We have to remember that scrape him to the core and you find an unreconstructed KGB colonel whose beloved Warsaw Pact and Soviet Union was destroyed by the cohesion of the West in 1989 when the Berlin Wall came down. And what he would like to achieve more than anything else is to sow discord and doubt amongst the minds of NATO members and break up that cohesion of NATO.
And New Zealand's Prime Minister has postponed her wedding because of the reintroduction of COVID restrictions. Jacinda Ardern says tougher measures are needed after 9 cases of the Omicron variant were confirmed in Auckland earlier this month. She was planning to get married next weekend. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Simon, thanks very much indeed. Welcome and a very good afternoon to those of you watching on television and listening on radio. Coming up this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends, is Labour now a credible opposition? To many, Labour lost its way and its purpose in the wilderness years of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. Sir Keir Starmer, elected in April 2020, had a slow start, but with a significant reshuffle at the end of November last year, things are looking different. But now, are they fit for purpose? A party on the rise may be. Plans have been published to punish English universities for poor value for money. The Office for Students has published a consultation detailing its minimum acceptable standards for students, which sets thresholds for dropout rates, course completion, and graduate employment that universities and colleges will have to pass to avoid further investigation. We'll discuss if this is treating students more like customers. The Spitfire, a classic of the Battle of Britain film, is on sale for £4.5 million. We'll be speaking to the man who restored it and has flown the plane as well, lucky blighter. So, unusual. Let me begin with an observation about yesterday's programme. Quite a few of you said I was Boris bashing as I examined the problems that he currently faces. Not so. What I set out to do was to seek a real measure of those problems with a close friend and an ally of the Prime Minister's, Conor Burns MP, a loyal minister and former PPS to the Prime Minister himself. I also talked to the news editor of Conservative Home. It's a Tory website, and he was very critical. What we try to do here is ask blunt questions with an open mind and then let you decide. I always invite you to send in your messages and your thoughts. And sometimes they're supportive and sometimes they tear me to shreds. And I love both. So today I have another, and I expect it will provoke. But please bear with us until you've heard all of the arguments. My question is this. Has Labour finally moved into a position where it is offering a credible opposition? Maybe now, when the Conservatives look over to the other side of the House of Commons to see Sir Keir Starmer looking confident with Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves to his right and Deputy Leader Angela Rayner to his left, do they seem a very real and imminent threat? Here's the point. Our democracy only works if governments of any and all persuasion are challenged by an opposition which is fit for purpose. It took Labour 18 years and 3 leaders to recover from Michael Foot's leadership in the early 1980s. To many, Labour lost its way and its purpose in the wilderness years of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. Sir Keir Starmer, as I said a moment ago, elected in 2020, had a slow start, but with a significant reshuffle at the end of November last year, I think things are looking quite different. It may have to do more with the government's problems than Labour's newfound confidence, but Starmer's party now have a double-digit lead in the polls. In his New Year's speech, he said Boris Johnson had lost moral authority, and in contrast to the Prime Minister, he would offer, and I quote, straight leadership. And he's carried out an onslaught of attacks on the Prime Minister's trustworthiness since the start of the year. Now, last week's PMQs attracted this tweet, and I quote, Keir Starmer's being witty and confident, seems to have grown about a foot. Tectonic plates shifting? Close quote. Not the usual and predictable hurrah from some Labour supporter, but that was from an FT columnist, Camilla Cavendish, who used to be David Cameron's head of policy in number 10 Downing Street. Now, I'm not asking if Labour will win the next general election or even the local elections in May. And as the Times columnist Ian Martin observed, Labour's advance so far under Starmer shouldn't be overstated. Totally agree with you, Ian. After all, this is midterm territory, and for many of us, Starmer himself will always be the man who tried to make Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister, close quote. But he too sensed a spring in the opposition's step. So I'm simply asking this afternoon if they've crossed the line into seriously threatening territory as Boris Johnson and his party wrestle with their own current challenges and as the nation moves out of COVID and hopefully recovery. It's all about the choices that you are offered by our precious democracy. You may be Tory to your bones, or Labour, or Liberal Democrat, or Green. I don't care. And anyway, it's none of my business. What is my business is to report on and discuss the state of our democracy, in which, as the cliché goes, it takes two to tango. Having no decent opposition is a seriously dangerous state of affairs, not diminishing policy changes either. Labour's recent claim to be the party of business as it demands a windfall tax on the energy companies will take some squaring. Sir Keir's acceptance of Barry Gardner's explanation of funding received from a known Chinese agent left many surprised, to say the least. Here's what Keir said. He's given an account. He's explained his position and declared that money in accordance with the register. Well, for many, that simply wasn't good enough. And finally, Starmer says his Labour Party's finally moved on from challenging Brexit. Well, on that, the jury is out as well. So, is it about policy? Is it about personalities? Is it about purpose? Have he and they got it? To explore this question, is Labour fit for purpose? I've invited a top Labour policy man from the Blair era, and last time Labour won a general election, a man who left Labour because of Jeremy Corbyn, and an impartial political historian and biographer. We'll hear what they have to say, and as always, I genuinely want to hear what you have to say before I finally have my say. I'd be very keen to hear from any Conservative voters watching or listening who are thinking of following Christian Wakeford and his lead when it comes to the local elections in May. Are you going to defect and put your cross in the Labour box, or have you been persuaded to stay loyal? Let us know your reasons either way. Let me know what you think via email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or on Twitter, Facebook, and of course, all the rest of it. And I'm delighted to be kicking off the conversation with political strategist John McTernan, who is also a former director of political operations for Tony Blair in those halcyon days. Great to see you, and thanks for joining us. I'll take you back to Camilla Cavendish and that quote. You know Camilla very well. Was she right? Not so much about Keir being a foot taller, but about the tectonic plates shifting.
Something is moving, something is changing, and look, the last election, there was a lot of words written, column inches filled by people saying there's been a great realignment of UK politics, and tracking that back to Brexit, the Brexit referendum. I've always felt that the last decade has been full of surprising results. There was the wipeout of Labour in Scotland in 2015, the bounce back in 2017, and the number of Tory MPs elected in Scotland. Our politics, it feels to be looking to find a new shape rather than having settled in a new shape. So yeah, tectonic plates are shifting. And the biggest one, the most difficult one for the Conservative Party is, with Brexit done, it really appears to me that the public have decided, they have a mood about public spending. Under the Tories, under Thatcher and Major, it was cut, and they decided the time was to move spending back. They voted for Labour. By the time we were finishing in government, I think the country thought spending had gone too far. They had to move it back. Gordon tried to do a bit of that. Tony tried to do a bit of that. But in the end, the Tories did that. They pulled the spending back. And now I think the public want more public spending. It's interesting that Christian Wakeford's rebellion, on which he was allegedly threatened, was about public spending on free school meals. And I think that's the touch point in politics now. Is it time to bring public spending back to a higher level? And that is more naturally Labour territory, and it's also more naturally Boris Johnson territory than it is the Tory territory.
Yeah, absolutely.
The problem is his balance inside the party is he's at odds with quite a lot of the backbenchers. They saw him as a winner. Now he's not a winner. They may throw him out for his politics as well as his transgressions.
John, let me take you back to that penultimate point, because I think it's absolutely crucial. When you look at the attacks that are made by the Tories on Boris, they are predominantly deep down about him being someone who lets the tax rises go through, the national insurance go through, and very happy to spend. But that's for them to deal with. This is about a Labour conversation. What I find incredible in that context is that Labour are now telling me that they are going to be the party of business. Rachel said it. Keir has said it, and you say that the public have got an appetite for public spending. I don't think Labour know what their core message is anymore.
Look, I want to go further. I'd like to see Labour saying that we're the party of competitive markets. I'm not for or against business. I'm for competitive markets in which businesses stand or fall on their own 2 feet. And that's the issue is that obviously Boris had his view about business. Labour had an anti-business strategy under Jeremy Corbyn. We're pro-business, pro-enterprise, pro-markets, I hope. And that's because 86% of people who live in Britain work in the private sector. All the debate in politics on the Tory side and the Labour side is conducted as though the 14% who work in the public service are the only workers we should care about. Without competitive markets, without successful business, we wouldn't have jobs, or we wouldn't have taxes to pay for public services. So I think that's really important. If you listen to what Rachel Reeves says, her phrasing is really interesting. She says Boris Johnson's government is a party of high taxes because it is a party of government of low growth. Labour will be a party of high growth and fair taxes. And I think that's where you combine all these things together. You can actually have more spending on public services with a more competitive economy, with a faster growing economy, and with fairer taxation that doesn't always fall on working people. I mean, the number of taxes working people have to pay at the moment, it has gone too far. And I think that's going to be a problem or it's going to be a battleground for politics at the next election. Have we pushed the tax burden too far onto workers? Is £3,000 a household going to be too much by the time of the next election? Well, people just go, look, we need a break from this lot.
Okay, final question, and it's back to the judgment of Sir Keir Starmer, embracing Christian Wakeford opened the floodgates, as you well know, to the left, saying, well, if he can come in, then so can Jeremy Corbyn. Yeah. And we await the final judgment from Keir on that. But one that worries a lot of people a lot more, both within Labour and within the Conservative Party, is Keir on Barry Gardiner and Chinese money, where Keir basically said, well, he's admitted it and it's in the members' register. That seems outrageous to many people.
They can't be a very intelligent intelligence service if they thought that by bribing Barry Gardiner, they could get anything sensible, intelligent, or insightful. To be honest, I mean, I think the charge that the Chinese Communist Party were finding a route to secrets through funding Barry Gardiner's office is risible. Anybody who knows Barry would not want to use him as a source for anything. His political judgments are pretty poor. His political performances are pretty poor. And he's been shown, I think his judgment has been shown to be profoundly lacking. But, you know, as the saying goes, you know, an American politician was once attacked for being stupid by a journalist. And he said, there are plenty of stupid people in America and they deserve to be represented in Congress just like any other group of people. I don't think being a stupid MP should bar you from being an MP. The question of Jeremy Corbyn is he's never going to bring himself to apologise for being the leader who brought the Labour Party into being investigated by the EHRC. The only other party being investigated by the EHRC ever in history with the fascist BNP. So,
John, fascinating stuff. We have to leave it there. Grateful for that. Welcome back anytime at all. John McTiernan there. The public view on public spending has shifted. They want more, and Labour should be embracing competitive markets, not just claiming to be on the side of a business. I'm delighted now to be joined by another friend of mine, Sir Anthony Seldon, author of a book called The Impossible Office, History of British Prime Ministers, and a great biographer. Anthony, good of you to fit us in. Was Camilla Cavendish right about Keir Starmer at PMQs and the tectonic plates shifting?
I think they're beginning to shift. Yes, I think that he is looking more and more impressive. Of course, it's rather the sun and the moon, and where one wanes, the other waxes. So when the Prime Minister is riding high, that's difficult for the Leader of the Opposition to do well. But as Boris Johnson is in eclipse at the moment, that's helped Keir Starmer, but so has a growing sense of confidence that leaders need. He just seems to have more persuasiveness. It's still a little bit awkward and mannered, but he does seem to have that confidence, Alistair, and he's got some very impressive team around him, including Rachel Reeves, as discussed.
I want to come to both of those points in just a moment. But while we're looking, people on radio won't know it, but folk kind enough to watch us on telly would have just seen Sir Keir very ebullient walking across Parliament Green. But you've written about this stuff, and real tectonic shifts as far as leaders are concerned are Wilson embracing white heat of technology, Kinnock calling out the left, Blair dropping Clause 4. Where's the meat with Starmer?
Well, we're beginning to see it. It's more of a mince meat coming out of the grinder, dollop at a time, rather than a heavy T-bone steak landing on your plate. That said, Harold Wilson, probably the best Labour leader in opposition of all time, came in with a rush in 1963 after a long period with Hugh Gateskill. Is Keir Starmer of the same class as Blair and Harold Wilson? Not yet. He's more in the Kinnock class. Neil Kinnock did so much from 1983 to 1992 to improve Labour's prospects with great courage and tenacity, but also using the right people. He had a great team around him. So I think, Alistair, it's always too early to say in politics, almost until something happens, but he's certainly moving in the right direction. Now, this is the question. Has he peaked too soon? One of two things can happen. Either Boris Johnson declines, as many in his party seem to want, and to do him down because of the factor that John was mentioning, that he's not the kind of Tory, the low tax, low spending Tory leader that they want, or for personal reasons, for reasons of probity and more. So if he goes, there will be a new leader. At the moment, Rishi Sunak is top, but anything can happen in leadership elections. And it would suit Labour for that to be happening sooner rather than later, so the shine can come off it. That's one scenario. Boris Johnson goes. The other is that Boris Johnson recovers. And he is, as we know, repeatedly said, a superb campaigner. He did take the country through Brexit. He has provided adequate to good leadership during the pandemic. There's a lot going for him. He's taken the party to the best landslide victory in 25 years. If he can re-find his mojo, then Keir Starmer could find himself facing either a refortified, reconfident Boris Johnson or a new leader. So I do not think that it is yet likely that Labour will win the next general election, but it has edged a lot closer in the last 3 months.
Final point, and you were kind enough to have been listening to what John McTiernan said. I was intrigued by his observation as a key founder of that Labour development process under Tony Blair that you referred to just a moment ago, saying it's not good enough for Labour to claim to be the party of business. If they're to be really credible in Middle England and win elections, they've got to embrace competitive markets, and they're a long way from doing that yet.
Yeah. Well, absolutely right. I mean, where on earth did Jeremy Corbyn think the money was going to come from? You have to have a thriving economy. Britain is now out of the EU. Britain has to forge ahead internationally with its services and with its manufacturing, and ensure that it is extraordinarily competitive. It's going to be tough to achieve that. And if Labour isn't convincing about that in the way that Tony Blair was convincing with Gordon Brown about running the economy better, then he will not get the support and the votes and the backing of business that he will need if he is to win the coming general election. So more work, Alistair, to be done in that department, though the direction of travel has been defined.
Fascinating. Anthony, always a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for giving us so much of your time this Sunday afternoon. Take care and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you. The great Sir Anthony Seldon there, author of The Impossible Office, The History of British Prime Ministers, perhaps hinting that if Keir wants to be Chapter 52, he's still got quite a lot of work to do. You're watching and listening to Alistair Stewart and Friends. We have more coming up on the programme. Conservative Muslim MP Nusrat Ghani claims that her faith played a part in her dismissal as a minister around 2 years ago. I'll be talking to the president of the Conservative Muslim Forum on this, but first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking largely cloudy for many of us, with patchy rain and brisk winds across northwest Scotland. Let's take a look at the details, zooming into the southwest. And here it will be a dry afternoon, often cloudy, but there will be a few bright or sunny breaks from time to time. Little change from this morning across southeast England. It will remain cloudy, but it will be dry throughout the afternoon, highs reaching 7 degrees Celsius, 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Wales will continue to see some of the best weather. It will be dry, and there will be some sunshine from time to time. Across the Midlands, it will remain dry but often cloudy. A few brighter breaks may develop across northwest England, though. Temperatures here will reach around 7 degrees Celsius, the mid-40s Fahrenheit. Winds will remain light all afternoon. Crossing the Pennines into northeast England, and the dry theme continues here also. However, skies will often be cloudy. Temperatures this afternoon will be around 8 degrees Celsius towards the coast. Winds staying light. Winds will be stronger, however, across northwest Scotland this afternoon, with some patchy rain here. The rest of Scotland looking drier, though, with some bright or sunny spells, especially in the east. Cloudier skies this afternoon for Northern Ireland compared to this morning, though it should stay largely dry, but perhaps some drizzle in the west by evening, highs of 7 degrees Celsius. Mostly dry but cloudy through this evening across the UK, patchy rain and brisk winds continuing in the far northwest, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up. I hug everyone I We learn from it and try and move on. That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome welcome back. It's 12:27 and you are watching and listening to Alistair Stewart and Friends here on GB News television and radio. A Muslim MP says that her faith was raised by a government whip as a reason why she was sacked as a minister in 2020. According to the Sunday Times, Tory Nusrat Ghani says that when she asked for an explanation, it was stated that, quotes, her Muslimness was raised as an issue, close quotes. Well, last night, the Conservative Chief Whip, Mark Spencer, identified himself as being said whip and said Ms Ghani was referring to him and added that her claims were completely false and he considered them defamatory. He denied ever using the words that Ms Ghani had alleged in her interview with the Sunday Times. I'm joined now by Lord Sheikh, founder of and president of the Conservative Muslim Forum. Very good of you to find time for us this Sunday afternoon. We've heard what she thinks and we've heard Spencer's response to it. What do you make of the allegations?
Well, I am very disturbed at learning what Nusrat has said. Nusrat was a member of the Conservative Muslim Forum. She's a supporter of Conservative Muslim Forum. And we have known her for over 9 years. I have found Nusrat to be a bright, articulate, and caring person. And I think she's an honest person, and I don't think she's a troublemaker. I am very disturbed to be told that she was asked to leave because of her faith, that Muslimness was an issue, that her colleagues were feeling uncomfortable about her being in the group. And the other thing which touched me was that she said it was as if she was punched in the stomach. She felt humiliated and powerless. Now, those remarks are indeed very, very disturbing. And in what I feel,
Mark Spencer, the target of
what Mark Spencer has said.
The Chief Whip says they're defamatory.
Let's get to the bottom of it and carry a full investigation.
OK, well, the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi, said he wants just that. But one step back, and I must do this, I mean, partly legally, is to be clear that the Chief Whip says it is false. These allegations are unfounded, and he uses an explosive word legally, defamatory.
Yes. Well, these words are very strong. Now, you got one person saying A, another person saying B. They're both parliamentarians. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's establish the truth. And the way we're going to establish the truth is to undertake a full investigation, and I'd like the investigation to be carried out by an independent person. Let's get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. You talk of investigations, and that does seem to be eminently sensible for both sides, but you and I very well know that your friend Baroness Varsi has said for a long time there is a problem of Islamophobia within the Conservative Party. It may not be in the Whip's office, but it is there. And you know, in the Singh report, there were severe criticisms. The Tory party hears these criticisms, but even if there is another investigation, the propensity to act upon them seems limited.
Well, you referred to Singh report, yes. The party asked Singh to undertake a report in 2019, and the report came out in May 2021. And indeed, there are failings in the party. I accept that. In fact, I support what Singh has said. And what Singh is saying is that we should undertake remedial actions within the timeline. And I think we need to do that. But obviously, I think with regard to Nusrat, we need a full investigation in regard to this particular case. And also, what is causing me a bit of concern is the behavior of these whips. And we have heard all sorts of allegations, intimidation, bullying, funds being not being given. Let's look at the behavior of the whips as well.
All right, Lord Sheikh, great to talk to you. Thank you very much for fitting us into what I know is a busy day for you. That's Lord Sheikh there, founder and president of the Conservative Muslim Forum, calling for a full and open inquiry and investigation, as indeed the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi, has as well. You're watching Alistair Stewart and Friends. We've plenty more still to come this afternoon, including the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Tom Tugendhat, will be here to discuss the escalating tensions between Ukraine and Russia. And after the break, we'll also be looking at the state of British universities, as the Office for Students wants to get rid of courses that don't offer high chances of employment. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the latest news headlines.
Thanks, Alistair. It's 12:32. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. As we've just been hearing, Downing Street says Nusrat Ghani, who claims she was sacked as Transport Minister because of her Muslimness, was invited to make a formal complaint but failed to do so. The Prime Minister spoke to her after learning of what he called the extremely serious allegation in 2020. Chief Whip Mark Spencer has also spoken out to deny the claims, saying he considers her remarks defamatory. The former Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick is calling for the national insurance hike, which he approved to be postponed. He says the government is responding to the costs of living crisis lamentably slowly. A suspect accused of killing a British man with a sickle is being questioned by police in Thailand. The 49-year-old was found dead in his home with knife wounds. Another man was injured and taken to hospital. Police say an initial investigation found they were attacked for playing music too loudly in the early hours of Saturday morning. Britain has accused the Russian president of plotting to install a pro-Moscow leader as head of the government in Ukraine. In an unusual move, the Foreign Office named the former Ukrainian MP Yevhen Muryev as a potential pro-Kremlin candidate to take over in Kiev. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says it shines a light on the extent of Russian activity designed to subvert Ukraine. You are up to date, TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now let's take a quick break.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. Exactly 36 minutes past 12, and you're watching and listening to Alistair Stewart and friends here on GB News, television and radio. Now, a story caught my attention during the week. It came from the Office for Students, saying that tens of thousands of students in England are studying for degrees at institutions that simply are not up to scratch, nor are many of the courses that they're following. Failure to sort that out could see the institutions being punished for low quality and poor value for money. The chief executive of the OFS, Nicola Dandridge, called it a landmark moment in efforts to tackle poor quality provision in English higher education. Now, it's a consultation, but it reminded me of the former Labour Party bigwig, Charles Clarke, and the defence that he offered me when we were discussing student fees way back when. He said, it'll turn students into customers, and if they don't get value for money, they'll demand that money back, and the institutions will suffer. Goodness me. I'm delighted to be joined now by Lord Rafe Lucas. He's the editor-in-chief of the Good Schools Guide, education commentator, and takes the Tory whip in the House of Lords. Rafe, great to see you. At last, some might say. It's clear enough on targets, tests and sanctions. Is it a complex document? Is it one that we can all dig into?
I think it's a long document because it's got to deal with the complexities of the way universities run. But goodness, am I glad to see it. I mean, I'm an unashamed partisan for parents and students. And at last, they're getting an intermediary in the Office for Students that is really interested in making things better for them. They've at last done something about student suicides, and now they're tackling quality of courses. The bar they're setting is not high. They're saying that courses have to retain 80% of the students they take on. In other words, that at least that number will complete the course and think that they've got something worthwhile and that they will go on to decent jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an enormous investment students are making.
Absolutely, which is why I mentioned Charles Clarke's point all those years ago when I was Deputy President of the NUS saying, oh, you mustn't charge student fees, it should be free at the point of delivery and all the rest of it. And that was Clarke's key point, was students as customers. But are you happy that they tag on this measure as well of whether or not a student gets a decent job having graduated or picked up their certificate or whatever it might be? Because some would argue that's not a university's job.
I am absolutely delighted they're doing that. I mean, suiting students for the world afterwards. For the amount of money and the years that students are spending at university, universities really ought to be sending students out ready to succeed in the world. I mean, not necessarily at the subject they studied at university. I mean, there's a limited demand for historians and classicists, but ready to take on the world, really understanding how people work, how the world works, how to make something of yourself after university. And a university that doesn't do that is really not doing well by its students.
How do you think the universities will react to it? Because generally speaking, they've been fairly quiet in response to this as I trawl through and Google it up, because some universities are notoriously arrogant, will just shrug their shoulders and say, oh, that's just the Office of Students. We've done it this way at Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, wherever for years, and we shall jolly well carry on doing it. Do you think it is a wake-up call?
I don't think in the current environment that the top-level universities have anything to worry about from this. Most of them are doing most of what's necessary anyway. And frankly, there's a sort of presumption that Oxbridge graduates are worth employing, which is probably down to their inherent qualities as much as to the quality of the education they get at universities. So I don't think the arrogant ones will suffer. And indeed, most of ordinary UK universities won't suffer. It's not. But the ones that will be really challenged by this are the ones who are just offering courses and then not doing all that it takes to keep students on them. The ones who are not really describing what the course is about and what it takes to succeed on it. And are luring students in without giving them a chance to say, no, that's not really for me.
Sure. I'm glad to hear you say that, and I note the distinction I think you're implying, which takes me to my next question, which is some of the, shall we call it, more technical courses and more technically driven universities. Indeed, some of them used to be polytechnics before they became universities. Courses like hairdressing and media studies often get a thorough kicking, and in my opinion, quite often undeservedly, because the world of work is changing, and you said that universities should be getting kids ready for jobs, ready to succeed. I think we need to have an equality of judgment as well between the classicists and the metal bashers.
I'm a great fan of practical courses. I think a lot of students are suited to them. And hairdressing can take you anywhere in the world. It's a wonderful passport to a life of exploration when you're young. It's something which I'm never going to trust a robot to do. Though I see you can get hair cutting machines that you attach to your vacuum cleaner. I think there will be a real understanding that personal practical skills are the core to human experience over the next 100 years, and that the more numerical things like accountancy and lawyering are actually going to be the ones that are replaced by computers.
Yeah, well, that's good. I agree with you as well. Little though I have, I wouldn't want a robot doing it. I have a very, very fine gentleman who does it for me. Final question. I mentioned in the introduction, Rafe, that you're active in the House of Lords. You take the Tory whip. Two questions. One is, Do the government have to embrace this from the office, or does it happen because they've already empowered them? And will you nudge the Department for Education and indeed the Minister for Universities to keep a weather eye on it?
Yes, and I'm really impressed by the support they've given to the Office for Students. I was a bit dubious when it was created, but it's really shown how good it can be in this and in other things. And it's navigated dealing with a lot of powerful and opinionated universities and not wavering from supporting students. And the things they're saying in this document about making sure that students from disadvantaged backgrounds have the same chance as everyone else, and that it's the university's responsibility to make that happen. I mean, I'm really delighted to see that.
Good to talk to you, Rafe. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Lord Rafe Lucas there, education commentator, editor-in-chief of the Good Schools Guide, and as he just answered, as I said, Conservative peer taking the whip in the House of Lords. I'm now delighted to be joined by another famous nudger, and that's the chair of the Education Select Committee, Robert Halfon, who sees a problem in the education world and doesn't just witter on about it, actually gets down there and does something about it. I hope the team have told you, Robert, I want to talk about universities, but I also want to talk about illiteracy in schools, which I know you've done a huge amount of work on. First of all, as far as the Office of Students is concerned, do you welcome the consultation, or would you wish they'd just get on with it?
Well, of course, I welcome the consultation, but we do have a big problem with many of our universities. I mean, universities have to be, obviously, they're about education and the experience of students. I had an incredible time at Exeter University when I went there, but they must be about building skills. We have a skills deficit in our country compared to many other countries across the world. They've got to be about social justice, ensuring that disadvantaged pupils and students have a chance to go to university. But above all, they must be about getting students jobs. And too many of our universities are doing courses where students are not getting graduate jobs at the end. And this is wrong, because students are paying £9,000 plus a year in order to get that education. And there are all kinds of statistics showing that something like 50% of graduates are not getting good graduate jobs when they leave university. So there has to be radical change. I don't mind the courses as long as people get good graduate jobs at the end, and as long as we meet our skills needs of our country.
And do you embrace the idea that, as I referred to Charles Clarke, who I know you know very well, although he's from the other side of the political divide, that notion of students as customers? You know, if you pay all of that money and you don't get what you want, you should be entitled to go in there, kick butt and get your money back.
Absolutely. And too many universities during COVID have not given students a proper service. I've had messages from students, and they are not getting the required tuition that they need. They should be getting their money back. But what I'd like to see the government do is to have a target where at least 50% of students were doing degree apprenticeships. It's a win-win, because if you do a degree apprenticeship, you still have a university experience, but you earn while you learn, so you don't take any debt. You get the skills that you need and the country needs, but you also get a good skilled job at the end, because we know that 90% of apprentices who complete, they get jobs. So the target of the government shouldn't be about university. It should be about skills.
Yeah.
And I went back to my old university only a few weeks ago to make a speech where to degree apprenticeship graduates. This was at Exeter University. It was an incredible thing to see. You know, hundreds of students getting degree apprenticeships, all being given jobs by the companies that they were doing their apprenticeships. And that should be the model. Of course, some students would like to do academic work, and that should continue. But I'd also like to see every single course at university involve significant amounts of work experience. So, for example, if you wanted to do English literature, you might want to work at a museum or a publisher. And I don't mean just going off for a year and doing it. It should be part of the week of that student's activities, because we need to. The world is changing. We were just talking about robots a moment ago and hairdressers. They say 28% of jobs could be lost for young people by 2030 because of artificial intelligence and automation. The world is changing. We need to really look at our university courses, what university is for, and adapt to the changing world.
Robert, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I promised I wanted to ask you, because I'm genuinely staggered when I read the piece in the Sunday Times suggesting a staggering growth in the number of children going to secondary school from primary unable to read and write properly. 200,000 of them last year, the department admitted. Sunday Times says it is now growing and getting out of hand.
It's pretty shocking. Part of this has been caused by COVID and the schools closing, which is why I argued from day one that it was a big mistake to close schools for most pupils, and why I've campaigned day and night to keep the schools open and get our children back to school. There's another article in the Sunday Times looking at what's gone on in America, and it shows that remote learning is actually a disaster, particularly for disadvantaged pupils in the United States. And the same thing has happened here. So what I'd like to see is every student should be assessed for how much lost learning there is, their literacy skills, their numeracy skills. And then if that is done by the government with the schools and local authorities, we can actually know the extent of the problem and adapt the catch-up programme and the tuition programme accordingly.
Well, talking about the catch-up programme, the quote at the end, which you will have seen because you've read the article, I know, in the Sunday Times, from the Department of Education on the literacy aspect is, and I quote, "An ambitious recovery plan is being rolled out. It isn't adequate and it isn't being rolled out quickly enough." What are you going to do about it as chair of the Select Committee?
Well, I keep arguing that what the Prime Minister needs to do is set out a long-term plan for education with a secure funding settlement. He's done it for the NHS. The Defence Department has a long-term strategic review of billions of pounds. Why can't the same happen for education? And it doesn't need to happen in the spring. It needs to happen now, and it's got to be led by the Prime Minister. In our committee, we are doing an inquiry into the catch-up programme. Now, I'm very supportive of that, but what I worry about is the statistics suggest that it's not reaching the most disadvantaged pupils, and it's also, there are huge regional disparities. So Southwest, there's a lot of it going on. In the Northeast, there's very little of catch-up programme going on by comparison. So the government really need to act, because they've rightly spent £5 billion of taxpayers' money on this. We've got to make sure that £5 billion is spent properly, and that's why we're doing the inquiry into the catch-up, and that affects everything, including the literacy, building up literacy.
My final brief observation to you, Robert, is that if they don't do that ASAP, then our first conversation about how children get into university and go on to get jobs and what have you, for over 200,000 kids, is not going to be an issue, and that's outrageous.
There's nothing more important than education, because it gives everyone that chance to climb the ladder of opportunity. And I do respect what Nadeem Zahawi is doing. I think he's got a grip with the education department that we haven't seen for some time, but there needs to be urgent action. It's got to be led by the Prime Minister, because anything if the Prime Minister says it, the whole of Whitehall follows. And we need that long-term plan for education with the secure funding settlement, and we need to sort out the catch-up programme sooner rather than later to make sure that it reverses the damage that has happened to pupils during the lockdown.
Robert, always a pleasure to talk to you on both universities and on primary and secondary education. Thanks very much indeed for your time. Robert Halfon, their Conservative Member of Parliament for Harlow and Chair of the Education Select Committee. Now, you've been getting in touch about our main topic today, our Labour on the rise. Can I just make two things crystal clear? I am not a Labour activist, and I never have been a Labour activist, and I'm not saying vote Labour, vote Labour, vote Labour. So if that's all you're going to tweet in, forget it, because I won't read it out, OK? Because it's false, defamatory, and a lot of old tosh. Point paragraph. Paul has tweeted, "Now, no, they are not. It seems that..." I'm going to start that one again. "No, they are not. It seems that way because the Tories are dropping. Labour are not ready, as they still have not learned anything from the 2019 defeat." Stephen on Twitter, "Over the last 5 weeks, Keir Starmer's asked 30 questions at PMQs. It is not his job to cross-examine the Prime Minister on parties. The Tories will do that. Starmer is no PM in waiting, but a leader in name only." David tweets, "Of course it's on the rise. it's obvious to see a much more electable and coherent front bench and starting to see solid policy options being proposed. Starmer is easily beating Johnson at PMQs now and looks more confident at every outing. There you are, a balanced representation of your emails. Do keep them coming in, but please do remember my 2 rules. And I'll show you my total absence of membership cards if you like. You're watching and listening to Alistair Stewart and Friends. Lots more coming up on the programme this afternoon. After the break, I'll be joined by a warbird enthusiast. That is not a word I have heard before, but I know what it's about. He restores and sells vintage airplanes. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking largely cloudy for many of us, with patchy rain and brisk winds across northwest Scotland. Let's take a look at the details, zooming into the southwest. And here it will be a dry afternoon, often cloudy, but there will be a few bright or sunny breaks from time to time. Little change from this morning across southeast England. It will remain cloudy, but it will be dry throughout the afternoon, highs reaching 7 degrees Celsius, 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Wales will continue to see some of the best weather. It will be dry and there will be some sunshine from time to time. Across the Midlands, it will remain dry but often cloudy. A few brighter breaks may develop across northwest England, though. Temperatures here will reach around 7 degrees Celsius, the mid-40s Fahrenheit. Winds will remain light all afternoon. Crossing the Pennines into northeast England, and the dry theme continues here also. However, skies will often be cloudy. Temperatures this afternoon will be around 8 degrees Celsius towards the coast. Winds staying light. Winds will be stronger, however, across northwest Scotland this afternoon, with some patchy rain here. The rest of Scotland looking drier, though, with some bright or sunny spells, especially in the east. Cloudier skies this afternoon for Northern Ireland compared to this morning, though it should stay largely dry, but perhaps some drizzle in the west by evening, highs of 7 degrees Celsius. Mostly dry but cloudy through this evening across the UK, patchy rain and brisk winds continuing in the far northwest, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's a little short of 5 to 1, 12:56 in fact, and you're watching and listening to Alistair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, television and radio. A Spitfire, or warbird as some people call them, that flew in World War II and starred in Hollywood movies, including The Battle of Britain, is on sale for a cool £4.5 million. The 79-year-old aircraft retains 95% of its original parts and can still fly. It's believed that the 1943 Supermarine Spitfire is the most intact of its kind. So if you have a spare 5 million, that allows an extra $500,000 to keep it going and keeping it polished, knocking around, it could be yours. And I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Grace, director of the Aircraft Sales Company, who has his glorious fingers and fingerprints all over it. It's a joy. It really, really is a joy. But when and how did you and your firm of experts get involved in rebuilding Spitfires?
It's a family business that my father actually started in 1984, which is the year I was born, funnily enough. So I've been in it for a while, shall we say. This particular machine I sort of happened across thanks to various connections when it was still sitting as a barn find, essentially, in West Texas, Big Spring, West Texas. Having been assembled just after the Battle of Britain film, the aircraft was essentially used to pay off a debt to the chief stunt pilot of the film, Wilson Connie Edwards. So he took the aircraft back to his ranch in West Texas and assembled it, flew it around a bit in the 70s, and then fundamentally just pushed it in the back of the hangar and left it there. I assisted with the pulling it out of the hangar, dismantling it, putting it in a shipping container. It then got posted to Australia, where the majority of the structural work was done. That's completely dismantling the aircraft and then essentially inspecting each part and then reassembling it again meticulously. It then came to us here in the UK at Northampton early 2020, where we finished the restoration, which involves all of the systems fit out and painting it and fundamentally making it work. So yes, I've been involved from pretty early on.
And work it does beautifully, but I'm a son of an RAF navigator, not pilot, but I've grown up with aeroplanes from way back. And what I always hear from people who love aircraft is the Spitfire has two absolutely supreme qualities. One is the joy of flying it, and you've done that. The other is the joy of listening to the hum of Merlin.
Quite, yeah, it is a wonderful noise, unmistakable in fact. And interesting that although the P-51 Mustang has the same engine installed, they sound almost entirely different. Certainly if you're boring like me, when heard from a distance, you can certainly pick whether it's a Spitfire or a Mustang, that's for sure. That seems to have rendered upside down, that footage.
That's just you showing off.
Obviously, the joy of flying it is, in fact, I always sort of have a little laugh when I see people with two hands like this. It is finger and thumb all the time. It's feather light. Truly, I can't believe that there has been a better aeroplane made. It's certainly the best flying aeroplane I've ever flown.
What a great compliment. Richard, a real pleasure. Go do a mosquito for me and come back and we'll chat again, because that was Dad's favourite.
No problem at all. I'm on it. Right, I'm going to cut down a tree right now.
Brilliant. Richard Grace, it's just slipped past 1 o'clock. Richard is the director of the Aircraft Sales Company. And what a lovely story about the aircraft itself, but also lovely story about it having been set up by his dad as a family business. I love that stuff. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. At half a minute past 1, let's bring you right up to date with the news. So getting carried away with Spitfires because I'm supposed to say, before I go to the news, hello and welcome this Sunday afternoon. And thanks for being with us for the last hour if you have. And hello and welcome for the first time if you've just joined us. I'm Alistair Stewart. And for the next hour, I'll be keeping you company with the stories that matter across the country. But first, now, let's bring you up to date. Here's Simon.
Thanks, Alistair. Yes, good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 1. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Downing Street says an MP who claims she was sacked because of her Muslimness was invited to make a formal complaint but failed to do so. Nusrat Ghani lost her job as Transport Minister in 2020. The Prime Minister then spoke to her after learning of the extremely serious allegation. Chief Whip Mark Spencer has also spoken out to deny the claims, saying he considers her remarks defamatory. Here's what the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab had to say.
I believe a claim like this, as serious as this, should, but it can only happen if the person making the complaint makes a formal makes it formally, that's when the procedures kick in. And just to be clear about this, that advice was given to Naz back in 2020.
The former Education Secretary has been accused of threatening to withdraw funds for a school after an MP considered voting against the government. Christian Wakeford, who recently defected to Labour, says he was warned to consider what he was doing before voting against a motion over free school meals. He told the Sunday Times Gavin Williamson, a former Chief Whip, had made the comment. Mr Williamson says he doesn't remember the conversation. The former Housing Secretary is calling for the national insurance hike, which he approved, to be postponed. Robert Jenrick says the government is responding to the cost of living crisis lamentably slowly. He added that confronting harsh realities is part of alleviating the situation for low and middle income families. Britain has accused the Russian president of plotting to install a pro-Moscow leader as head of the government in Ukraine. In an unusual move, the Foreign Office named former Ukrainian MP Yevhen Muriev as a potential pro-Kremlin candidate to take over in Kiev. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says it shines a light on the extent of Russian activity designed to subvert Ukraine. Former head of the army, Lord Richard Dannett, told GB News the West needs to work out what Putin's objective is.
We have to remember that scrape him to the core and you find an unreconstructed KGB colonel whose beloved Warsaw Pact and Soviet Union was destroyed by the cohesion of the West in 1989 when the Berlin Wall came down. And what he would like to achieve more than anything else is to sow discord and doubt amongst the minds of NATO members and break up that cohesion of NATO.
A suspect accused of killing a British man with a sickle is being questioned by police in Thailand. The 49-year-old was found dead in his home with knife wounds. Another man, who's 55, was injured while trying to stop the suspect. Police say an initial investigation found they were attacked for playing music too loudly in the early hours of Saturday morning. A British Iranian detained in Tehran has started a hunger strike over the lack of progress in securing his release. 67-year-old Anousheh Ashuri has been held in a prison for more than 4 years, accused of spying for Israel. He denies the charges against him. His daughter Alika Ashuri, who's concerned about his health, says her father is taking the action in solidarity with other dual nationals who are also being held hostage. New Zealand's Prime Minister has postponed her wedding because of the reintroduction of COVID restrictions. Jacinda Ardern says tougher measures are needed after 9 cases of the Omicron variant were confirmed in Auckland earlier this month. She was planning to get married next weekend. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's get back to Alistair Stewart and friends.
Simon, thanks very much indeed. I'm Alistair Stewart, and until 2 o'clock I'll be keeping you company along with friends and friendly guests. Still to come, is Labour now a credible opposition? To many, Labour lost its way and its purpose in the wilderness years of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. Keir Starmer, elected in April 2020, had a slow start, but with a significant reshuffle at the end of November last year, things are perhaps looking different. But now, are they yet fit for purpose? A party on the rise maybe, but perhaps not there yet. The situation on the Russian-Ukrainian border continues to cause grave concerns across Europe and indeed around the world. An army over more than 100,000 has been assembled along not only the Russian-Ukraine border but also within Belarus, Russia's close ally. Tom Tugendhat MP will join me very shortly to give the latest and what he thinks it means for the United Kingdom. BBC are in the headlines again. The licence fee will be frozen for 2 years. Senior journalists are speaking out against the broadcaster. There are claims of impartiality problems too. So what does the future hold for the BBC? GB News is all about you, our viewers. Any burning question or story that you think we need to cover, no matter how big or small, we genuinely want to hear them. Get your voice heard by calling, emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk and put Alistair Stewart in the subject line. So the precarious situation on the Russian-Ukrainian border continues to cause grave concerns across Europe and around the world. Russia has already shown its willingness to do more than just talk when it invaded and occupied Crimea. Now an army of more than 100,000 has been assembled along not only the Russian-Ukraine border but also within Belarus. The Russian Navy is on active manoeuvres in the Black Sea and fighter aircraft crisscross the skies across the region. The UK has sent armour and training forces to help Ukraine. It hinges on Ukraine's post-Cold War wish to fully embrace the West and join NATO. Russia, still wounded by the humiliation of the 1980s and 90s, simply won't have it. Well, right now it seems that they're willing to put their money and their military where their mouth is. I'm delighted to be joined by Conservative MP Tom Tugendhat, Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Tom, good to see you. I open myself to correction, but is it, as I suggested, essentially unfinished post-Cold War business? A defeated Russia will simply not have Ukraine, its neighbour and former ally, in NATO.
Well, I think you're partly right, Alistair, and it's lovely to be with you again. But I think it's a little bit about the future as well. You know, we're dealing here with a dictatorship in Russia under President Putin that is incredibly aware of the example of countries around them. You know, there are Russian-speaking and ethnically Russian populations living in countries like Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, who have understood very clearly the benefits of democracy, of freedom, of being members of the European Union, of being able to trade and travel, all these sort of things that Vladimir Putin has spoken against. And he is seeing it encroach closer and closer, and he is deeply concerned that what he's going to face is an overthrow of his own mafia government. And so, yes, it is about the past, you know, as General Danat put it, you know, deep down, well, not very deep down, actually, he's still an unreconstructed KGB colonel, and he still thinks that the fall of the Soviet Union was a geopolitical catastrophe. Only for the Russians is that true, of course. But actually, it's also a little bit about the future in that he doesn't want his own gang of thieving oligarchs to be overthrown.
OK. Blunt question again. What's it got to do with us? Ukraine are not yet in NATO, so the mutual assistance clause doesn't apply yet. You mentioned the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia. We've got troops up there, training exercises. We send troops willingly to Poland when they're rubbing up against Belarus on the immigration problem. Are we putting ourselves and our soldiers, sailors and airmen in jeopardy for the sake of an issue that is not our affair?
No, we're not. The problem is it's not us who chooses what's up to us or, you know, what affects us. The enemy gets a vote too. And in this case, Vladimir Putin has made it about us. He's made it about us because he's called into question the NATO alliance. He's demanded the withdrawal of, excuse me, NATO troops like our own from countries like Estonia and Latvia and Romania and Poland and Romania and Bulgaria. And he's done so because what he's trying to do is to undermine NATO. Now, you and I both know, Alistair, that our security doesn't just rest on our own armed forces. It rests on the NATO alliance. And if you just look at the number of troops who are massed on the Ukrainian border, there's 100,000 Russian troops. You know, our entire army is around 70,000, you know, so this is a massively unequal struggle if we're not willing to partner with friends and allies. So that's why it's about us. Secondly, this isn't about us in the sense that we're not really putting serious troops into Ukraine. What we're doing is putting small training teams. I don't know how many British troops are, but I'd be very surprised if there was any more than 50 or 60, because they're there as training teams. That is to help the Ukrainian armed forces learn to use the weapon systems they've got. And that's easily the best thing to do. You know, the correct way to help somebody is not to fight their war for them, but to help them to fight it themselves. And the Ukrainians, you know, it's a population of about 44 million. They've got armed forces of roughly 1 and a bit million, you know, including border guards and people like that. And you end up thinking, look, these guys can do it themselves if they're equipped and supported. And so that's what we're doing. And the last point, though, Alistair, is, look, you and I have spoken, oh, crikey, I can't remember how many times. Do you remember when I was in Lithuania earlier this year in August, looking at those migrants coming across the border, being pushed over the border, weaponized by Belarus to destabilize Lithuania and Poland? We know that the population moved from Syria through Turkey into Europe in 2015 time. Were very destabilizing for Europe. Well, this is a population of 44 million people in Ukraine. And the last time the Russians invaded and sent their army in, which was in 2014, the Russians spent a lot of time expelling people from eastern Ukraine and causing huge numbers of internally displaced people. We know that refugee crises have an effect on us, and we've got to support those countries who are standing up for freedom, who want their citizens to stay at home, and who simply want to enjoy what you and I enjoy, which is the sovereign ability to decide who our friends are.
Absolutely. It was one of the standout lines in the piece that you wrote for the Sunday Telegraph this morning, and I quote it back to you. Our commitment, i.e. the United Kingdom, our commitment to freedom is being tested. Not is absolute, is something that matters, but is being tested. Dominic Raab told my friend Trevor Phillips on another station this morning that if push comes to shove, it won't be full-scale war. It won't be the army going in. And secondly, Joe Biden, and you comment upon this in the piece as well, a minor incursion may happen, it may not. I mean, it seems to me that you are embracing a higher moral challenge than either the Deputy Prime Minister or the President of the United States of America.
Look, my view on this is pretty simple, Alistair. I was elected to serve my country and to serve the community in Kent that I'm privileged to live in. And I see it as a continuation of the service of the last 20 years in the Army and in the Foreign Office. And if I'm asked for my best professional advice as a soldier and as a former diplomat, and now as a politician, it's stand up to bullies, because it only ever gets worse. And if we are not willing to defend freedom on the front line of Ukraine, if we're not willing to stand with our partners in NATO on the front line of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Hungary, and so on, then please don't be surprised when we find that the erosion of freedom leads to our front line being shrunk all the way back to Dover. Now, that would be a very, very severe reversal. And I'm very sorry to say it, but what we're seeing out of the White House today, and to a certain extent, the distraction that we sometimes see out of our own administration, is worrying. We need to be absolutely clear, because if we are not clear, then the people who exploit that unclarity, that confusion, are those who are trying to stir against us. And in this case, it's Vladimir Putin. And you don't need me to tell you that he's dangerous. He's annexed Crimea. This is the first time a border in Europe has been changed by force since 1945. He's used nerve agents in Salisbury. He's used nuclear agents, which is what polonium is, in London to murder people and put thousands of British lives at risk.
You also in the piece seem to be saying that the new Chancellor in Germany and the soon-to-be challenged President of France need to remember that in international affairs, sometimes there are things that are more important than the price of gas and the free flow of Russian energy. You say that the European Union needs to get its act together, individually and collectively.
Look, that's exactly right, I'm afraid. And the reality is the European Union has not got its act together. The European Union is at the moment very divided on this. It's not surprising. It's a trade bloc rather than a political bloc, and it's not able to cohere. But the real danger is that Germany, I'm afraid, is making some very severe mistakes in forbidding Estonia to sell German-made weapons or transfer German-made weapons to Ukraine. What they're actually doing is they're advertising a fissure, a fracture, if you like, in the NATO alliance. What France is doing by suggesting that there's some sort of separate European-Russian talks that can get round this is, again, undermining that alliance. And what America is doing by conducting bilateral talks with Russia without Ukraine is playing into Russia's hands by pretending there's such a thing as a US or Russian sphere of influence. There are not. These are free people, and they have the choice to freely associate however they wish. They are not under a Russian or an American sphere of influence. They are a sovereign people. Exactly the same way as we are. We are not under a US sphere of influence. We are not under a European sphere of influence. We are a sovereign people, and we can choose to ally or not to ally with whoever we choose. And I think the sort of double standards that we're seeing in Ukraine erodes our own freedom, because it leads to dictators like President Putin deciding how to salami slice alliances that have kept us safe for 70, 80 years.
Yeah. Two final quick ones, and we talked earlier on about the allegations that Nusrat Ghani has made in the Sunday Times today about her allegations that her Islamism, an odd way of describing it anyway, but that's what it says, was a problem when she lost her job. And also the Chief Whip, Mark Spencer, putting his hand up and saying it was me, but also indulging in nicknames for colleagues, including a particularly unsavoury one for you. A, do you think that Nusrat has a point, or, as Michael Fabricant has said, she just wasn't a very great minister who had to be moved on?
Well, look, I think Nuz is first of all, she's a great friend. Secondly, she's extremely courageous. She, like me, has been sanctioned for calling out Chinese repression of the Uyghur Muslim community in Western China. So she's not exactly a shrinking violet. She's quite willing to take one for the team in that sense. And so, I think this is something that requires investigation. I've always got on very well with Mark Spencer, schoolboy nicknames aside. I'm afraid I was getting on too much with the job of trying to serve our community and our country to indulge in that. But there you go. Everybody behaves as they wish to behave, and if they don't want to leave the playground, I can't make them. As far as Nuz goes, well, I've always found her words to be true. So let's investigate this, because I think it's a very serious allegation. As you and I both know, we're stronger when we draw on the full talents of the team, and we're very lucky in the United Kingdom to have people from communities around the world, and that enriches our society and enriches our skills and our reach. So I hope very much this can be answered quickly, and if there is a question to answer, that it's dealt with immediately.
Tom, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for so much of your time this Sunday afternoon.
Always good to see you.
Best to you and all at home. Thank you very much indeed. Tom Tugendhat there, Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, with his candid and, if I may venture, profound thoughts on what's actually going on the border between Ukraine and Russia and what is at stake for the United Kingdom, plus thoughtful observations about Nuzgani, his chum, Nuz, as he called her. It's now time for our Good Causes segment of the programme, when we shine a spotlight on an individual, or sometimes individuals, who go above and beyond to make the world simply a better place. Well, my next guest is someone you may have seen on your screens before as the winner of the BBC's Race Across the World. Let us take you back in time during the show and show you why this is him, and his next challenge means so much to him.
Shouldn't be like this, man. Should not be like this. If I wasn't on the race budget and this was my money, I'd give it all. And then I'd go to the closest bank and take as much as I can.
Extraordinary, as I said, people who do great things and rise above it all to do good things. And I'm delighted to welcome Ayman Chowdhury to the programme this afternoon. Warmest congratulations, first and foremost. Let's cut away the charm and the greetings. Just an amazing thing. We last saw you on the screens with your nephew after you'd won Race Across the World. What happened between your victory and this newest challenge? I'd have thought you deserved a rest.
I've not taken no rest, no. Since my win on the Race Across the World, I've been sort of pushing, try generating more awareness and money to help children in third world countries.
I think the idea of doing it for a purpose. Sophie Rayworth, a dear friend of mine on the BBC, has raised millions for cancer research because of George Alastair. You've got a particular thing about young people and education, haven't you? So you're doing the marathon to help this process of building a school.
That's right. So I took up running 8 months ago, and I did the London Marathon, and I raised quite a lot of money. And I've decided to do another marathon, which is the Manchester Marathon, during Ramadan, whilst fasting, to raise more money and more awareness, to help orphans, to help kids in third world countries, to give them a chance in life. I think my time on the BBC Race Across the World is when you get to see it for yourself in real life. It has a big effect on you, and that's what's happened really since that time. I've just gone out and just trying to raise as much money and awareness for these projects.
The other thing I love about this story is that you, as it were, inherited that sense of responsibility and reaching out from your dad.
That's right. My late father, he passed away last year during COVID. He set up an orphanage back in Bangladesh about 40 years ago. And our family holidays was all about going to Bangladesh, spending 2-3 weeks at a time, and we'll spend most of our time in the orphanage. I did that for like almost 16 years, and that's what my father instilled in us about, generating money, generating awareness to help these kids in third world countries, and getting to talk to them as well, because in my time at the orphanages, I learned a lot about the kids, about their situation, And it's a different experience once you get to know them on a one-to-one basis, and that's what I'm trying to do myself in Nepal. Try to build that orphanage in that kind of way.
Yeah, you really are a great bloke. And you've recently become a dad. I mean, I don't have to tell you that because I suspect you rather know that, but people listening to our conversation might not have done. So I'm conflicted here. Are you bringing up this lovely child to be a marathon runner, or to be a BBC television star, or perhaps to go with Grandad's vision of just doing a little bit for orphans? What's your dream as you look at that beautiful new person?
My fundamental dream is just to become a good human being, whether in different ways, whichever way she wants to go. But that's a principle. It's just to be good and just to be kind, and that's what my father instilled into me from a very young age, and that's what I like to instill into her.
There is no better answer, Eamon. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck with the marathon. And I'm delighted. I had lots of questions about getting ready for it and health checks, but when you told me you'd done the London Marathon already, I know you'll be healthy. But good luck with the fundraising, and good luck with parenthood. Thoroughly enjoy every moment of it, and keep in touch with us. Many thanks, my friend.
No problem. Thank you, Alistair. Cheers.
Eamon Chowdhury, winner of the last series of the BBC Two's Race Across the World, who is, as you've just heard, raising money through running the Manchester Marathon to build a school in Nepal. You can find him online, and you can find out how you can follow his story and maybe, if you're so moved, perhaps help him with that fundraising. We've plenty more to come this afternoon on Alistair Stewart and Friends. After the break, I'll be joined by the former Culture Secretary, John Whittingdale MP, to discuss what the future might hold for the BBC. See you in a couple of minutes.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking largely cloudy for many of us, with patchy rain and brisk winds across northwest Scotland. Let's take a look at the details, zooming into the southwest. And here it will be a dry afternoon, often cloudy, but there will be a few bright or sunny breaks from time to time. Little change from this morning across southeast England. It will remain cloudy, but it will be dry throughout the afternoon, highs reaching 7 degrees Celsius, 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Wales will continue to see some of the best weather. It will be dry, and there will be some sunshine from time to time. Across the Midlands, it will remain dry but often cloudy. A few brighter breaks may develop across northwest England, though. Temperatures here will reach around 7 degrees Celsius, the mid-40s Fahrenheit. Winds will remain light all afternoon. Crossing the Pennines into northeast England, and the dry theme continues here also. However, skies will often be cloudy. Temperatures this afternoon will be around 8 degrees Celsius towards the coast. Winds staying light. Winds will be stronger, however, across northwest Scotland this afternoon, with some patchy rain here. The rest of Scotland looking drier, though, with some bright or sunny spells, especially in the east. Cloudier skies this afternoon for Northern Ireland compared to this morning, though it should stay largely dry, but perhaps some drizzle in the west by evening, highs of 7 degrees Celsius. Mostly dry but cloudy through this evening across the UK, patchy rain and brisk winds continuing in the far northwest, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 28 minutes past 1, and you're watching and listening to Alistair Stewart and friends here on GB News. The reverberations of Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries reading the riot act to the BBC continue. Accused of just playing another fight back for Boris Johnson line, she dismissed that and went on to announce a 2-year freeze in the licence fee and said the corporation needs to sort itself out. Well, the Director General, Tim Davies, defended the BBC against charges of anti-Tory bias, claiming it is impartial. He warned the Dorries deal would see the BBC shrink and employ fewer people. But the TV regulator Ofcom also says that complaints about impartiality are on the rise and observes that fewer young people are watching or listening to anything on the BBC. So what to do about funding, the licence fee, and to me, most importantly, impartiality? I am delighted to be joined by a good friend of mine, Conservative Member of Parliament for Malden and former Culture Media Secretary John Whittingdale. And there he is. John, good morning, good afternoon to you. We sat down and talked about this in a big event at the Edinburgh Television Festival back in 2015. You said then the funding model wasn't fit for purpose, change was needed. The Guardian said it was a big fist in a velvet glove. It still hasn't happened, John.
And I don't think it will happen for some time, Alistair. I've always been of the view that the licence fee in the longer term can't be sustained. And one of the reasons is that, as you said in your introduction, younger people particularly are now watching less and less of what we call scheduled television. You've got these huge streaming services now available, Netflix, Amazon, Disney, etc., and more to come. And people can genuinely now say that they just don't ever listen to, watch, use the BBC. And therefore, I do think it is right that we need to look for alternative models. I've said that many times, as you mentioned. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. But the debate should start now. So I completely agree with Nadine. But I think the alternatives are still some way off.
OK, I'll come back to some of the possible alternatives if we have time towards the end. But as you said, you've talked about it. All sorts of eminent folk have discussed it. That debate's going out. What there wasn't such evidence of when we had that long, big conversation all those years ago was the fixation with political correctness. Diversity consultants at $250,000 a year, even at children in need. We both know that young folk aren't watching it. Stuff like that is really turning off middle-aged and older folk as well.
Yes, I think that's a fair challenge to the BBC as well. I mean, I do think the BBC is somewhat obsessed with what you might call the woke agenda, hence all these consultants you talk about. And also what happened since our debate back in Edinburgh is that we had both the Brexit referendum and then the general election 2019. And in both cases, they sort of caught the BBC and indeed a lot of other commentators on the hop. The commentators just did not realise the strength of feeling, the shift in opinion that was taking place across England particularly. And I think that was evidence that they have lost touch with those people. And that's something the BBC needs to address.
Yeah, I 100% agree about that, and there are specific programmes, and you've seen it because I've written it in the New Statesman and places that particularly cause me concern because they're public service broadcasters. I personally think the allegations of impartiality, not ruled out by Ofcom say they're on the rise, are an even greater challenge for the BBC than the licence fee model. If they don't sort that out, folk will walk.
And indeed, it will do huge damage to the greatest asset the BBC has, which is its reputation as a trusted, reliable broadcaster. And the BBC is admired around the world, and millions of people listen to the World Service because they think they can trust the BBC. It's not a Russian propaganda channel like RT or a Chinese one. It is a reliable, trusted news source. And once impartiality is eroded and people feel that the BBC may have some agenda, that they're not entirely objective, that undermines that reputation and does huge damage.
Final question, and it's cheeky, but we know each other well enough that you expect me to ask it anyway. Before all of this, of course, you worked for Margaret Thatcher back in Number 10, and you know how these things work. I'm accused of Boris bashing. You personally know that is simply not the case. I'm asking today if Labour's fit for purpose, and I'm accused of being a Labour supporter. You know that is also not true. But here's my question. Margaret had her moments and challenges and was eventually ousted by colleagues. Do you believe that Boris Johnson will bounce back, or does he face terminal challenges?
Well, I think there are a couple of things which will influence that. Obviously, the immediate publication of the Sue Gray's report is going to, I hope, answer some of the questions. And it will be her findings, which I think will influence a lot of MPs as to their attitude. And then beyond that, there is no doubt the government is not popular. We've lost a lot of the whole of the lead we have, the opinion polls, and are now trailing, and that will have perhaps an impact in the months to come. MPs at the end of the day will worry about their own seats. We're still a long way off the election. There is still a lot of time in which the government can recover, in which Boris can recover. But I think those two factors, what Sue Gray says, and then what happens in the particularly local elections coming up in May, will have a strong bearing on whether or not the Prime Minister continues.
John, always a pleasure to talk to you and to listen to your erudite and objective comments there. You take care and have a great afternoon. Thank you very much. Welcome anytime. John Nightingale there, Conservative Member of Parliament for Malden, and, as I said, former Secretary of State for Media, Data, Culture, Sport, all sorts of things, but the man who knows probably more about television in the House of Commons right now than any others. You're watching Alistair Stewart and Friends. Plenty more still to come this afternoon, including, are the Labour Party on the rise? Mike Gapes, very good friend of mine, former Labour MP who resigned from the party over Corbyn and anti-Semitism, will be giving his take on how it looks right now. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the latest news headlines. Here's Simon.
Thanks, Alistair. Yes, it's 1:35. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Downing Street says Nursat Ghani, who claims she was sacked as Transport Minister because of her Muslimness, was invited to make a formal complaint but failed to do so. The Prime Minister spoke to her after learning of the extremely serious allegation in 2020. Chief Whip Mark Spencer has also spoken out to deny the claims, saying he considers her remarks defamatory. The former Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick is calling for the national insurance hike, which he approved to be postponed. He says the government is responding to the cost of living crisis lamentably slowly. Britain has accused the Russian president of plotting to install a pro-Moscow leader as head of the government in Ukraine. In an unusual move, the Foreign Office named former Ukrainian MP Yevhen Muryev as the potential pro-Kremlin candidate to take over in Kiev. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says it shines a light on the extent of Russian activity designed to subvert Ukraine. A suspect accused of killing a British man with a sickle is being questioned by police in Thailand. The 49-year-old was found dead in his home with knife wounds. Another man was injured and taken to hospital. Police say an initial investigation found they were attacked for playing music too loudly in the early hours of Saturday morning. The British-Iranian Anousheh Ashuri, who's been held in a Tehran prison for more than 4 years, has started a hunger strike. The protest is over the Foreign Office's lack of progress in securing his release. The 67-year-old is accused of spying for Israel. He denies the charges against him. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Let's take a quick break.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. Coming up to 20 to 1, you're watching and listening to Alistair Stewart and Friends here on GB News, television and radio. So this afternoon we've been discussing if the Labour Party are fit for purpose now, following comments after Prime Minister's Question Time, reshuffle and the rest of it. Shortly you'll be hearing my take and yours as we share emails, but I'm delighted to be joined by a very old friend of mine as my final guest on this subject, handpicked by me in debate with my brilliant team. He's a former Labour MP, and when he was an MP, he was chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. He left Labour over Corbyn's leadership and indeed over anti-Semitism. And I'm delighted to welcome Mike Gapes now back to the programme. Goodness me, it's great to see you, and thank you very much for fitting us in. Are you looking, Mike, at a party under Keir that you might actually seek to rejoin?
Well, I have to say I read very closely the article that Keir Starmer wrote this week in the Daily Telegraph about Ukraine, and it was far better than anything I could have expected. I was really pleased with it, and it reflected the way I feel about Russia and Ukraine and the kind of politics that I think the Labour Party should have had throughout its history and did when we had Labour governments. And so I'm really encouraged by that. But in formal terms, I can't rejoin the Labour Party yet because I'm excluded because I stood against Corbyn's candidate in Ilford South in December 2019. And there is a 5-year exclusion unless they decide that they are going to lift it and invite me back before then.
We shall watch that one with interest, but it segues beautifully to my next question, and that is, however brilliantly Keir writes about Ukraine, Russia in the Telegraph, and I agree, incidentally, I thought it was a very, very powerful piece, and not unlike Tom Tugendhat, who just told me on this programme, we stand for freedom, and that's an obligation that we have as a nation state. The minute Keir did a kind of circus act embracing of a Tory defector, out come the left, people you've been fighting since our student union days together, and said, well, if you can have a Tory backbencher joining you, we can jolly well have Corbyn back. In the heart of the Labour Party, very little's changed.
I think that's not entirely true. I think that we're in a process. The membership of the Labour Party is changing. It's visibly changing. A combination of some on the far left leaving, some of the anti-Semites being expelled, and a change in the culture within the party. But I think that will take a long time, because the toxic effect of the Corbyn period, the 5 years that he was leader, is going to take longer to completely remove. And there have always been, in all parties, people who are very, very tribal. And I mean, I can remember how I was denounced by Labour people when I left the Labour Party in February 2019, including some members of Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet, who said some very unpleasant things about me, and that's fine. That goes with the territory. So it's inevitable that some people within the Labour Party will not want to have somebody come from the Conservatives. But I have to say this is very significant, because the last time that a Conservative MP crossed the floor and joined the Labour Party in opposition was in 1995, when Alan Howarth, who was a Conservative former minister, left the Conservatives and joined Tony Blair's Labour Party. That's that long, 27 years. And some joined when Labour was in government, people like Peter Temple Morris and Sean Woodward and others, Quentin Davis. But that was all after Labour was in government. But to do it in opposition is a very significant thing.
All right. I'll be playing clips from my two of my other guests in a moment, but ahead of that, just a very quick take from John McTiernan, who you know very well from the Tony Blair years, and also Anthony Seldon, who, again, I think you know from the education work that you were interested in as well. McTiernan said, embracing or saying that we want to be the party of business is not good enough until Labour actually embraces competitive markets. They haven't gone the whole way. But Seldon, ironically, said, well, I think Keir Starmer probably has made some progress with the Labour Party, but I fear as an individual, Keir Starmer may have peaked.
I don't agree with either of them, actually. I think that Rachel Reeves has done a good job as Shadow Chancellor in the short period she's been there. And certainly, given Boris Johnson's remarks about business and the frustrations of many businesses because of what's happening with regard to Brexit implementations, and also the sense that many have that the government has not been fully supportive of them, despite the COVID support. I think there is an open goal for Labour to be, as Tony Blair's government was, a pro-business party as well as being pro-worker. And I think that is very positive. So I'm somewhere between the two of them on this.
Well, a perfectly reasonable answer, and in a sense, being between those two positions is exactly what my thesis is, and that is to identify that there have been improvements since the Corbyn days, but it's not a full job. I'll tell you why I sympathised a little with Anthony Seldon in saying he may have peaked, that reshuffle that you've just referred to, John talked about, and Anthony talked about as well. My biggest take on it was a clever move by Keir, but he brought back into the centre in senior jobs three people who'd actually make a better fist of leaving the Labour Party than he does, and that's Yvette Cooper, Wes Streeting and Rachel Reeves.
Well, I've got a very high opinion of Wes. He was my parliamentary neighbour, and in his maiden speech, he referred to me as his mentor. So I think very highly of him. But he's still young. He's got a future to come, and I'm not sure that he's ready for that role yet. But I think Keir Starmer is actually growing into the role. I've been encouraged by the way he's done things in the last few months. The reshuffle was part of it, but also the positioning of the Labour Party on a number of issues. And I think politics is a marathon, not a sprint. And who knows who his opponent will be, whether Boris Johnson will still be there next month or next year, who knows. But Keir Starmer is clearly somebody who still has to project himself and also deal with the legacy of the Corbyn period, which is not yet resolved in a number of ways, including Corbyn's own position. But I think he's doing better in the last few months than he was before.
I'll rest it there because that's a perfect way of encapsulating it. Better, but still perhaps, like my other guests have said, still not completely there yet, and we shall watch this space. Finally, I mentioned in the introduction, and you referred to Keir's article about Afghanistan in the Telegraph. As a former chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, can I ask you one of the questions that I asked Tom Tuganda, and that is, taking the point about, standing for freedom, are we in danger of risking the United Kingdom and the men and women who represent us abroad and fight in our colours by getting into Ukraine, Russia, above our weight?
Well, we won't be doing it alone. We are there as part of a number of NATO countries who are already supporting Ukraine in different ways. And in addition, we are part of an alliance. And although the UK has left the European Union, we are still geographically a European country, and we have huge interests in what happens in our continent. And instability in that part of Europe will have huge knock-on consequences right the way across the region. And if Putin gets away with unbridled aggression and annexations and occupations and war against neighbours, it encourages that kind of behaviour elsewhere. We have to draw a line here, and we have to say very firmly to Putin, you can't do this. Get back in your box.
Mike Gapes, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for finding time for us, and have a great afternoon. Thank you very much indeed. Mike Gapes there, former Labour MP and former chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, with his take on the progress that Labour's making. Not a complete job yet, but it's making some progress. You might well say he would say that, wouldn't he? But others from the Labour Party might just say, oh, it's all perfect already. We go for balanced takes on this, and which is why I invited John McTiernan as well, but also Anthony Selden onto the programme. So let's hear a little bit of what my other guests indeed had to say this afternoon. I began that conversation with John, who's the political strategist, but also importantly former director of political operations for the hugely successful Tony Blair. When asked if Labour could ever be the party of business, he observed,
listen to what Rachel Reeves says. Her phrasing is really interesting. She says Boris Johnson's government is a party of high taxes because it is a party of government of low growth. Labour will be a party of high growth and fair taxes. And I think that's where you combine all these things together. You can actually have more spending on public services with a more competitive economy, with a faster growing economy, and with fairer taxation that doesn't always fall on working people. I mean, the number of taxes working people have to pay at the moment, it has gone too far. And I think that's going to be a problem for it's going to be a battleground for politics at the next election.
Within both of the major parties. Anthony Selden, author of The Impossible Office, The History of British Prime Ministers, had some fascinating things to say about Boris Johnson.
If he can re-find his mojo, then Keir Starmer could find himself facing either a re-fortified, re-confident Boris Johnson or a new leader. So I do not think that it is yet likely that Labour will win the next general election, but it has edged a lot closer in the last 3 months. Now, this is the question. Has he peaked too soon? One of two things can happen. Either Boris Johnson declines, as many in his party seem to want, and to do him down because of the factor that John was mentioning, that he's not the kind of Tory, the low tax, low spending Tory leader that they want, or for personal reasons, for reasons of probity and more.
Absolutely fascinating. Now it's time for my take. I simply asked this morning if Labour have crossed the line into seriously threatening territory as Boris Johnson and his party wrestle with their own current challenges and as the nation moves out of COVID and hopefully recovery. As Anthony Seldon said, it all depends on Boris Johnson's pursuit of his mojo, because the one thing that Labour have not done is absolutely seal the deal with the electorate. That is clear even from the opinion polls. I make no judgment on Boris Johnson or on the Tories. It's all about the choices that you and I are offered by our precious democracy. Choices that are offered by all of the political parties. You may be Tory to your bones, or Labour, or Liberal Democrat, or Green. I don't care. And anyway, it's actually none of my business. What is my business is to report on and discuss the state of our democracy, in which, as the cliché goes, it takes at least two to tango. Having no decent opposition is a seriously dangerous state of affairs. So I'm not diminishing the policy challenges either. Labour's recent claim to be the party of business as it demands a windfall tax on the energy companies will take some squaring. As John McTiernan said, it's a cliché until you embrace competitive markets. That they have not yet done. And John's a Labour man. Sir Keir's acceptance of Barry Gardner's explanation of funding received from a known Chinese agent left many surprised, to say the least. Oh, he's explained his position and declared it according to the register. Not good enough for very many. And finally, Sir Keir says his Labour Party has finally moved on from challenging Brexit. On that, the jury is out, whatever my good friend Mike Gapes just said. So it's about policy, it's about personalities, and it's about purpose. Have they got it? I retain my doubts about Sir Keir, but I'm impressed by several on his new front bench. I think there remain contradictions between some of their policies and their core brand. And I think the hard left are up to seeing themselves still as entryists remaining alive and kicking. So my conclusion, rather like a school report. There are progress points here, but there are problems that remain. Could be better, and for democracy's sake, should be a lot better. So, there you are. You know what I think. Time now for your thoughts on whether Labour are fit for purpose. Mike sends an email. It's easy to be in opposition just taking an opposite government view. If you're wrong, it's forgotten. If you're right, you make hay. The fact is that bad-mouthing any government initiative, irrespective, good, bad, loses credibility. It'll be the silent majority that will determine the next government. Hear, hear. Not those minorities who tend to shout the loudest. Boris has got some things wrong, but also many things right. There are more important things to worry about than Partygate. Mike speaks for many people on that one. John emails, the Labour Party are no different from last year or the year before. What's the difference? Keir is the man who went against the people. We voted for Brexit. He did his utmost to stop it. Tories have shot themselves in the foot, but the Labour Party are the party of pro-immigration and ruin this country. They should come back in 10 years. On Brexit, John, you also speak for many of our correspondents. Peter, there's no one to replace Boris, but it's likely that he will be sacrificed so the Tories can reunite and move on. Not sure about that. This will cost them the next election. Starmer and his gang will do what Labour always does, tax and spend. Minority issues will take centre stage, so after one term of Labour, a new Tory leader will emerge and they'll get back to power. And so it goes on. Jeff sent an email. Alistair, I would never vote Labour again after listening in detail to their utter disregard for the people's Brexit referendum result. It was disgraceful, the actions of Labour MPs in Parliament, with Starmer at the lead, and a very biased Speaker of the House at the time didn't help the proceedings. Labour not to be trusted. I think that's a reference to John Bercow rather than to Lindsay Hoyle. I jolly well hope it is. And have I got time for one more? Oh, I have. Good. Anne emails, I'm absolutely disillusioned with politics and personally don't think it matters who is in power. I feel there is no representation of views such as mine, and this is significantly linked to the management of COVID and the censorship of alternative views. There was no challenge in regards to this. I believe the government are puppets of a higher order. I don't know about a higher order, but I absolutely 100% agree with the rest of it. Look at both parties, all parties objectively, and make your mind up. Don't just shut the door on one because you're pro the other one. That's what this entire debate's been about. Back on Friday at 8. See you again next weekend. Till then, very good afternoon to you.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking largely cloudy for many of us, with patchy rain and brisk winds across northwest Scotland. Let's take a look at the details, zooming into the southwest. And here it will be a dry afternoon, often cloudy, but there will be a few bright or sunny breaks from time to time. Little change from this morning across southeast England. It will remain cloudy, but it will be dry throughout the afternoon, highs reaching 7 degrees Celsius, 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Wales will continue to see some of the best weather. It will be dry and there will be some sunshine from time to time. Across the Midlands, it will remain dry but often cloudy. A few brighter breaks may develop across northwest England, though. Temperatures here will reach around 7 degrees Celsius, the mid-40s Fahrenheit. Winds will remain light all afternoon. Crossing the Pennines into northeast England, and the dry theme continues here also. However, skies will often be cloudy. Temperatures this afternoon will be around 8 degrees Celsius towards the coast. Winds staying light. Winds will be stronger, however, across northwest Scotland this afternoon, with some patchy rain here. The rest of Scotland looking drier, though, with some bright or sunny spells, especially in the east. Cloudier skies this afternoon for Northern Ireland compared to this morning, though it should stay largely dry, but perhaps some drizzle in the west by evening, highs of 7 degrees Celsius. Mostly dry but cloudy through this evening across the UK, patchy rain and brisk winds continuing in the far northwest, and that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up.
I hug everyone.
We learn from it and try and move on. That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed.